The television series Desperate Housewives certainly features our fair share of complex characters and stressful storylines, as at its core, the series itself is basically a fictional representation of life, as characters go through the many ups and downs that comes with it. Whether this is characters going through divorces, deaths, relationship issues, struggles with drugs or alcohol, difficulties adjusting to parenthood, financial struggles, struggles with work, etc. But while all the characters face adversity throughout the series, there's one character that seems to face a new struggle every season. And this is the character of Bree Van de Kamp, who is played absolutely flawlessly by Marcia, as Bree seems to go through the most throughout the entirety of the series. Whether this was her battle with alcoholism, widowhood, her battles with her children in Andrew and Danielle, her multiple relationships throughout the series, including her eventually dating the man who poisoned her first husband, dating the lovable yet highly controversial Orson, and being an accessory to murder multiple times in order to keep her image pristine. And while she started out as a prudish and businesslike woman, we saw her eventually grow into someone who became more open, exciting, and spontaneous. These reasons and many more that I'll cover in this video are why the character of Bree Van de Kamp is the most complex character in Desperate Housewives. Before we get started, be sure to click subscribe and click the bell to get notifications on all upcoming film and television content. When we are first introduced to the character of Bree Van de Kamp, us and everyone on Wisteria Lane will soon come to know her as a compulsive, controlling, manipulative, yet perfectionist mother, wife, neighbor, and friend. However, she describes herself as a closed-door housewife. While the door to her household will be open for dinner parties and events, that same door will most often be kept closed when it comes to her personal life and what goes on inside the Van de Kamp home. As throughout the entire series, Bree is portrayed on the show as someone she is not entirely. Despite this, Bree is someone that many viewers share similarities with and root for, even despite her controversial arc. Heavily inspired by the heartwarming Martha Stewart, the Stepford wife, and the woman of the 1950s, Bree Van de Kamp takes pride in illustrating the perfect home and being the perfect woman. As in the pilot episode, we get a small dose of what Bree is made of, as she takes great pride in cooking, cleaning, upholstering, gardening, sewing, painting, etc. But it's beneath the perfect image that lies the truth about Bree Van de Kamp. While we get a glimpse of the early life of Bree Van de Kamp towards the end of season 2, with all the neighbors recalling their initial move to Wisteria Lane, and later on in the first season, we learn that Bree was almost forced into morphing herself into being the perfect housewife, lady, and mother, as she grew up with a strict father who installed these virtues into Bree at a very young age after her mother's death. But it's when we first get a rare glimpse into the early life of Bree in the 17th episode of the final season, Woman and Death. Occurring during a flashback in a conversation with her mother, Bree learns what she thought was important in life, such as the acts of how to be a lady, how to make elegant desserts, and most importantly, taught Bree about the infamous mask. The mask was a face that Bree learned to master as her life went on, as the main component of this mask was a smile, resulting in men never truly knowing what Bree is thinking or how she is feeling. Her mother specifically taught Bree to wear this mask when encountering empowering men. It's also within this mask that Bree would later learn to suppress her emotions and present the illusion of perfection to everyone. Throughout the first season, the main storyline that follows Bree and her family is while they may look perfect on the outside, they are most definitely not on the inside, as we see this in the pilot episode when her husband Rex is hospitalized after eating onions. In this scene, Rex not only shares his frustrations about his marriage towards Bree, but he also shares his children's frustrations too, as all three have grown tired and simply cannot live in the picture-perfect, plastic, fairy tale world that Bree's compulsive behavior has created. And we can clearly see this in the beginning of the pilot episode as well, whether this is at dinner during an argument or the smug facial expressions that rest on the face of Rex, Andrew, and Danielle. To make matters worse, Rex asks for a divorce, resulting in Bree and Rex to attend marriage counseling. And later in the first season, we discover that Rex was having an affair with a white-collar prostitute named Macy Gibbons. No matter what situation or scenario for Bree, it's always about keeping up with her appearance.
Please hurry. If the kids see you sleeping down here, they're gonna start asking questions.
Let them ask. I don't care anymore.
Well, I care. They don't need to be burdened with our marital problems, and while we're working things out, the least we can do is try to keep up appearances.
We can easily tell that Bree is someone that is a prevaricator and a deceiver, as she constantly wants to maintain her picture-perfect image throughout the series. And this is especially true towards Bree's friends, as throughout the first season, she hides away all these problems so that the truth can never be told, simply because her friends will view her as weak and powerless. And later in the first season, we can see the extreme lengths that Bree is willing to go to in order to protect her perfect image. As we watch Bree visit Macy Gibbons in prison and offers her $14,000 to remove Rex's name from her client list. We also watch Bree come up with a devious plan to purposely have Andrew's car stolen, simply to maintain her family's pristine image. It almost feels at times throughout the series for Bree that her image and her family's image is more important to her than being a good wife, mother, friend, and neighbor. There's also numerous other occasions that display Bree's absurd lengths that she's willing to go to preserve her family's flawless portrayal to the residents of Fairview. But she also goes to extreme lengths to maintain the empowering mask in order for Bree to make herself feel like she's in complete control of every situation. Whether this was her wacky plan to cover up her daughter's pregnancy or covering up the murder of Gabrielle's stepfather. Throughout this process, Bree also hides the truth of her separation from her children. She's reluctant to tell Andrew and Danielle the truth by telling them nonsensical stories about Rex's whereabouts. This causes her children to steer away from their mother and become angry with their mother's decisions and controlling behavior. This is most visible in Bree's son Andrew, as during this time, he leans more towards alcohol, sneaks out to a strip club, and runs over Mrs. Solis. Out of the 8 seasons of Desperate Housewives, it's the first season that is most certainly the most difficult for Bree. As towards the end of the season, Bree questions herself that if she's a good mother after all by sending Andrew off to juvenile school. The difficult journey of the first season for Bree ends with the death of Rex. It's here where we see Bree suppressing her emotions with that same mask her mother taught her to wear, as she finishes polishing her silverware and then proceeds to break down crying. As the series progressed, Bree still managed and maintained to keep the perception of nothing ever being wrong in the Van de Kamp home. Despite the fact that after the death of Rex, Bree leaned more towards alcoholism and went to extreme lengths to hide it from her friends. And it's during this time where Lynette provides Bree with an epiphany to change her life for the better, by getting Bree to admit to having a problem with alcohol and getting the help she needs to recover. This sparks a new revolution in Bree, as it's after this time where we see Bree lean more on cooking, cleaning, and finishing her cookbook that Rex always held her back on and neglected. With the series itself skipping 5 years, we got to see plenty of characters grow and develop. While some of the characters grew into better versions of themselves like Gabrielle and Carlos towards the end, and some of the characters basically stayed the same like Lynette, no character grew more throughout the series than Bree. And it's during this time jump where Bree takes on a successful cooking and catering career where you would think that she would learn from her past, by not having everyone abide by her strict controlling rules. But yet, the success of Bree's newfound love for her dream career only makes Bree worse, as she is more controlling and strict than ever before, as she develops this ego that she is better than everyone else, all due in part to her most recent success with her own business. This is particularly visible with her relationship with Catherine Mayfair. But the growth of Bree was something that took the entirety of the series, as she overcomes the most adversity out of all the other characters. From season 1, she was this controlling housewife and mother who wanted everyone to abide by her rules. In season 2, Bree had to overcome alcoholism and being a widow. Season 3, she works up the courage to remarry to Orson, even still coping with the death of Rex and fighting off being murdered by her mother-in-law. Season 4 saw Bree hide Danielle's pregnancy and be held captive by Catherine's ex-husband. Season 5 saw Bree take on a celebrity status with the launch of her cookbook, but also face another divorce with Orson. Season 6 saw Bree have an affair with Carl Meyer and learn that Orson had been paralyzed after a plane crashed onto Wisteria Lane. also resulting in the death of her secret lover and Carl. Season 6 saw Bree blackmailed on losing her business by Rex's secret firstborn son and Sam, but it's towards season 7 and the final 8th season where Bree finally starts to grow and develop. As season 7 saw Bree go out of her comfort zone by dating a much younger man in Keith, all while she begins to go through menopause. And she even helps her own son in Andrew overcome his addiction with alcohol by being a mentor to him, but also being a good mother for what seems like the first time in the series. And in season 2, we also saw her finally accept Andrew's sexuality of him being a homosexual, but she fully accepts Andrew's sexuality towards the end of the series, as this is something that she completely looked down on when we first met Bree, as Bree was judging Andrew's sexuality in a more comedic manner.
Homosexuality is not a choice. You were born this way.
I'm the one who told you that.
And it took me a long time, but I was finally able to wrap my head around it. Honey, you're here, you're queer, and I'm used to it.
Finally, season 8 began with Bree coming up with the plan to cover up the murder of Gabrielle's stepfather. We watch Bree go through a sexual phase of having one-night stands with numerous strangers to fulfill an empty void of her friends abandoning her. Watch her relapse into alcohol, get arrested, and almost commit suicide from the amount of guilt that she feels she caused towards her friends. We see Bree finally learn and accept what is truly the meaning of life and what makes her happy. We see this in season 5 as she doesn't give in to Orson potentially getting half of her catering business that she grew to be very successful thanks to her determination and hard work. Rather, she comes to terms with herself that her marriage and her appearance of happiness that was always so greatly important to her is not as important as her own happiness, which would be her business. However, the very next season, we watch Bree contradict her newfound beliefs, standards, and values by giving into Sam, who blackmails Bree for her business. Despite giving up the business, this shows just how far Bree Van de Kamp has come, as she's willing to give up her business and her public appearance to protect those who are closest to her, as the Bree we are first introduced to wouldn't think twice about giving up her business or her public appearance. But the Bree that we see towards the end of the series displays the true understanding of what life is and what really makes you happy in life. It's one of Bree's last relationships is where she starts to change for good, and this is during her relationship with Keith. As during her time with Keith, Bree becomes more open and spontaneous than she ever was before. During her marriages with Rex and Orson, Bree was more classical, suburban, and white collar. It's her relationship with Keith that opens her eyes once again to what is truly important in life, as the relationship between Bree and Keith was crucial for the growth and development of Bree, as she abandons her picture-perfect image that she desired so desperately in the beginning of the series, not giving a damn of what anyone thinks, and she is now moving away from the plastic fairy tale person that we saw in the beginning of the series. But it's the murder of Gabrielle's stepfather that shows how far Bree is willing to go to, as she comes up with a plan to hide the body of Gabrielle's attacker simply to make sure that Carlos doesn't go to prison. She proceeds to put those ahead of her in this situation, and she does so selfishly.
This is a very bad man. He attacked our friend and her husband protected her, and now we are going to protect them.
As it's her friends who helped her grow into the lady she accumulated to becoming in the final season. Throughout the series, Bree is the most fascinating character out of all the women on the show. She grows tremendously from being the selfish individual that only cared to save her reputation for her own well-being, to eventually opening up and becoming a more genuine person, as she sacrificed the woman she thought she had to be that was installed by her mother, and we watch her grow into someone Bree never thought she'd become. This makes Bree so compelling and someone we root for throughout the series even when we don't agree with Bree. In the end, Bree ultimately does come out on top despite staring jail in the face throughout the final season. However, as she progressed in life, she ultimately loses the complete control that she always had in her life by realizing that she simply cannot control everything, thus resulting in somewhat of a demise, with Bree relapsing, having one-night stands with strangers, almost committing suicide, but also a realization that not everything is about her nor revolves around her world. Her values, her standards, her commitment to being the perfect housewife helped herself and her family back from happiness. Throughout the many relationships, traumas, her battle with alcohol, being an accessory to murder multiple times, and having friends and family turn their backs on her, despite all of this and so much more, we always find a way to sympathize and root for Bree despite knowing what kind of person we knew Bree was before. Which is why these storylines make Bree Van de Kamp the most fascinating, triumphant, and complex character on Desperate Housewives. What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comment section below. For more film and television content, keep it locked here, right here on this channel.